She walked into the yard of the last ranch on the trail with nothing but the clothes on her back and the dust of 3 counties in her hair. Her boots were cracked across the toe. The left one had been wrapped that morning with a strip of muslin torn from the only good shirt she had left. She had been walking for 9 days. The dog met her first. A rangy blue heeler with one torn ear came around the corner of the horse barn at a trot, sniffed her ankles once, and walked beside her as if it had been expecting her. That should have been her first warning that this place was going to be trouble. She stopped in the shade of a cottonwood and waited. From the porch of the house, a girl of perhaps 8 years old watched her the way children watch anything new that has come to their yard without explanation. The girl did not speak. The girl did not wave. A man came around the corner of the barn with a currycomb still in his hand. He was somewhere past 50, lean in the way men get from years of short sleep and longer winters. He had the look of someone whose wife had been gone long enough that he had stopped counting the years and started counting only the work the absence had added to his hands. He wore an oiled leather vest, even in summer. He set his palm flat on the top rail of whatever fence he was near, as if he were still measuring it. "Sir," she said, before he could turn back. "I can work." He looked at her boots. He looked at her hands. He looked at the road behind her, as if he expected a man to step out from behind her at any moment and explain what she was doing out here alone. Then he looked back at her face. "I don't need a hand," he said. "I don't need your hand," she answered. "I need work. Anywhere." He did not invite her to sit. He did not offer her water. He pointed to a fork leaning against the barn gate and told her the stalls needed mucking, then turned his back before she could say thank you. She picked up the fork. "Before I take you further into this, tell me where you are listening from tonight. The kitchens, the parlors, the porches with the lanterns still burning. I think about all of them open at the same hour, and it steadies me to know. Drop it in the comments if you have a mind to." Cora Henley was her name, though she would not give it to the man at the barn for 2 more days. She had owned a place called the Little Pine, a stretch of high country east of the Yellowstone, 63 acres of meadow, and a barn her husband Tom had built with his own hands the year their daughter was born. Their daughter had not lived long enough to learn her own name. Tom had lasted 4 more months. After the fire took the barn and the cabin and the winter's stores, Cora had walked away carrying the quilt her mother had pieced from wedding dresses. She had traded it, 2 days out, for half a sack of flour from a homesteader who pitied her. She had been walking 9 days. Every ranch she had asked it had turned her on, some with a closed gate and a polite no, some with a slower silence and a way of looking past her that told her she had been measured before she had opened her mouth. The last one, the stiff-backed cattleman north of Livingston, had stood on his own porch and pointed her down the road with the barrel of his rifle before she could dismount. She had told him, in the flat way you tell a man something that no longer embarrasses you, that she had no horse to ride off on. He had lowered the rifle then, slower than she would have liked, and watched her go. The yard she had walked into belonged to Ezra Calloway, and it was the last working ranch before the road bent north toward the snowline. Beyond it lay 50 miles of unsheltered range and skeleton timber, and the cold that came down out of Canada in October and did not leave until May. Cora mucked the stalls until the light went amber. She chopped kindling until her hands bled at the calluses. She carried water from the creek until her back forgot it had ever been anything other than a thing that carried water. At dusk, she found a corner of the sheep shed where the hay had been thrown back to make a kind of nest, and she pulled it around herself and slept. She woke in the small hours to a sound she knew. It was not a sound a person forgets. It was the deep, low, almost invisible groan a mare makes when labor has begun wrong. Cora had heard that sound 3 times in her life. Twice she had known what to do about it. Once she had not. She was on her feet and through the door of the sheep shed before she remembered that nobody had asked her to help. The mare belonged to Ezra. Cora had seen her in the paddock at the back of the barn that afternoon. A big paint, 16 hands, heavy with the foal she had been carrying all summer. Cora had stopped twice during the mucking just to look at her, because the way the mare was holding her head told Cora 2 things she did not want to tell anyone. The foal was big. The mare was not entirely sure she wanted it. Now the mare was down in the straw, and the groan was coming again. Ezra was not yet at the barn. The girl, Hattie was the name Cora would learn by dawn, was standing in the doorway of the house in a nightgown, holding a lantern she could barely lift, watching. Cora crossed the yard in 4 strides. She put her hand flat on the mare's flank. She felt the muscles bunch and release. She felt the sweat under the hair. She smelled the clean, sharp blood smell that told her the water had already broken. She turned to Ezra, who had come up behind her without a word. He was in his trousers and boots, but no shirt. The lantern light caught the new white in his hair. "The foal is breech," she said. "Or near enough. You have an hour, maybe less, before you lose them both if someone who knows what they are doing does not put a hand inside that mare." He did not ask her how she knew. He did not ask her where she had learned. He only stood there in the cold dark of his own paddock, looking at her as if he were weighing something he had not known he was carrying. "Show me what to do," he said. There was no time to teach him. There was only time to do it. Cora worked by feel. Tom had taught her. Her father had taught Tom. The trick, her father used to say, was not strength. It was knowing where the mother ended and the foal began, and being patient enough to wait for the body to tell you. She worked 3/4 of an hour. Ezra held the mare's head. Hattie held the lantern. The mare screamed once, deep in her throat, and the sound of it went through Cora's hands and into her own chest, and pulled at something she had not known was still held tight in there. Cora's eyes stung. She did not stop. When the foal came, it came wrong and then right, all at once. A wet, dark, ungainly thing, longer than a man, still wrapped in the shine of its own first minutes. It lay still an instant too long. Then it kicked once, twice, and made a sound so small it was almost an apology. Cora sat back on her heels in the straw. The blood was up to her wrists. Her hands would not stop shaking. Ezra did not say thank you. He did not say anything for a long moment. He looked at the foal making its way, somehow, up onto its chest, and then he looked at the woman kneeling in front of him in his own barn, and he said only, "Hattie, fetch her a blanket." On the second morning, when Ezra came down from the house carrying 2 tin plates and a coffee pot with a bent handle, he set them on the step of the sheep shed, wordless, and walked on. Hattie sat beside Cora while she ate, swinging her legs, not quite sure she was allowed to talk, but unwilling to leave. "I'm Hattie," the girl said. "I know," Cora said. "I heard your father call you." "From where?" "From the barn. Sounds travel at night." Hattie considered this as if it were a piece of information she would have to file carefully. "You're not a man," she said. "No," Cora said. Hattie nodded, satisfied with this, and got up and walked into the house without asking permission. Cora watched her go, and the morning came over the pasture in a long, slow wash, and Cora thought about how many mornings she had eaten alone and how many more she might yet. By the end of the week, Ezra had stopped watching her to see if she would leave. This was the highest compliment he knew how to pay. Cora understood it for what it was. She answered it the only way she knew how, by getting up earlier than he did. She pulled the foal through its first wobbly week. She had Tom's notes, in her head, every step. She taught the foal to follow her hand with a bucket, which was easier and slower than what a mare would teach, but which left the foal trusting her in a way the mare could not. By the 8th day the foal would come when Cora whistled, even when the mare did not. Hattie was there for all of it. She sat on the fence rail with her knees drawn up, watching as if Cora were performing some trick of weather or of language the girl wanted to memorize before it was gone. On the 10th day, Cora found Hattie trying to whistle to the foal on her own. The foal did not come, but it lifted its head. Hattie beamed as if she had won a prize. "You have to keep doing it the same way," Cora said, "every time. Even when it doesn't work. Especially then." Hattie nodded very solemnly, the way only an 8-year-old can take anything. "Talk to me in the comments for a moment, won't you? Have you ever been measured before you opened your mouth, the way Cora was at the gates she could not get through? Have you ever watched a child begin to trust you in a place that was not your own yet? Remind each other in the comments. It is good to be reminded." The trouble came 2 weeks after Cora's first morning at Ezra's table, and it came with a name, Wendell Brought. Brought owned the next ranch north, 6 miles up the trail through a stand of lodgepole pine. He owned, between winter range and summer range, more cattle than any other man in the county. He owned, between his 2 marriages and the 3 sons the second one had brought him, the kind of family a man uses as a fence to keep other people out of his business. He was 58, soft-bodied, loud, and patient only about land. He arrived one morning at Ezra's gate with 2 of his sons on horseback, and he did not get down. He sat his saddle and looked at Cora the way he might have looked at a stray yearling that had wandered unaccountably into the wrong pasture. Ezra, he called. I want a word. Ezra came out of the barn. He did not invite Brought in. He did not go to the gate. About what? Ezra asked. About a woman. About her standing on your land. About what the neighbors are saying. About what the neighbors are saying? They're saying you've taken up with one. Brought spoke the word carefully, as if it were a small animal he wanted to kill without getting his hands dirty. They are saying wrong. They are saying you have a woman sleeping in a shed on your place. Brought leaned forward in the saddle. They're saying it, Ezra, and the daughters are asking their mothers, and the mothers are asking me, and I am asking you. You want to give me an answer that will settle them down. Ezra was quiet a moment. Then he said, she pulled a foal out of a dying mare on my property and saved a stud worth $400, and Hattie has stopped waking in the night. That is my answer. Brought did not like it. You could see it in the way his jaw set. You think she ought to be paid, he said. I have offered her wages. You have offered her, what, a stall and a shed and a plate on your step, and now you think that is wages. Brought half smiled. He used his smile the way other men use a knife. I am offering, for the sake of your name in the country, to buy out her contract. I'll give her $60 and a ride to the stage stop. That will settle it clean. She goes. The country stops talking. Everybody's daughters stop asking their mothers questions none of us want to answer. Cora was on the porch. She had heard all of it. She stepped down off the step. The boards complained under her boots. $60, she said, and a ride. Ma'am, Brought said, I am doing you the kindness of a fast road home. I have no home, she said. I have no horse. I have no husband. I have these hands. $60 is 2 months' wages for a man in this country who knows what he is doing. And I have given you and your neighbors 4 foals and a mare not yet dead, and I have not yet missed a sunrise on the property of a man who took me in. You may take your $60 and your ride, and you may ride them home yourself, and you may tell the daughters and the mothers and whatever else is talking in this country that the woman at Ezra Calloway's place is not a harlot. She is a hand. And if they would like to come and see what a hand looks like, they are welcome to step off their own porches and walk on up here and ask. The 2 sons looked at their father. Brought's jaw had gone tight as a wire under skin. You will regret this, miss, he said at last. Yes, Cora said. I expect I will. And she turned on her heel, and she went back into the barn, and Ezra was standing at the gate staring at her as if he were seeing a woman step off a stage into a country he had thought he knew. That night, after Hattie had been put to bed, Ezra came down to the sheep shed. He stood in the doorway with a lantern, looking at the hay nest, looking at the woman sitting in it with a tin cup of chicory in her hands. That answer you gave him, he said. Yes, she said. You did not have to. He was buying me off your land, Ezra. If I had taken it, I would have bought myself off your land too. I have not been bought off anything in 9 days of walking, and I do not intend to start. He nodded slowly. Cora, he said. That is my name, yes. Cora, I would like you to stay on past the hay season. I would like you to take the small cabin out behind the north pasture, the one my wife Hattie Sr. lived in 21 years. I would like you to take the wages I would have offered a man, which is to say enough. I would like you to bring my daughter up off the fence when she is ready, and I would like you to teach her to whistle to anything that breathes. She held the tin cup in both hands a long moment. Then she said, Yes, 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 Ezra. He set the lantern down on the ledge outside the doorframe and walked away. She sat with her chicory and listened to his boots on the hard ground, and she thought about her mother and the quilt, and about what becomes of the things we give up that we have no real reason to give up. The things we give up because we were tired, mostly. Because someone looked at us once as if we were small. She did not sleep that night, but for once it was not because she was being hunted. It was because something she had not expected to feel again felt as if it had put its hand in hers. The trouble came back in November, and it came as Brought had promised, only not in the form Brought had promised. The first blizzard of the season broke the 3rd week of October and never stopped. Snow fell for 9 days without a thaw between. The drifts on the lower range built up to the second rail of the fence posts. The saddle horses would not leave the lee of the barn. The cattle, those few Ezra still ran, crowded into the shelter of the cottonwoods and would not move out to graze. Ezra and Cora lost a yearling the first night, found it under a cut bank 2 days later, alive, with one leg folded wrong under it. On the 7th night, the temperature dropped to 40 below. The wind came out of the north and stayed there for 3 days, a constant, low, almost mechanical sound against the walls of the house. On the 8th morning, a young rider came down out of the snow on a spent horse. It was one of Brat's riders, the youngest of the sons. "This is Wendell," he said, before Ezra could get a word out. "My father has taken sick. He is asking for you. He is asking for the woman at your place too. I don't know why. He is asking." Cora looked up from the table. The girl was sitting beside her, eating her porridge, pretending she had not heard. "Sick with what?" Ezra asked. "He will not say. He will not let the doctor in. He has not let the housekeeper go for 3 days. He has not eaten. My mother is sitting in the kitchen crying. My brother is in the bunkhouse with a rifle across his knees saying he will not let anyone in either. My father has got a fever and he is saying names I have never heard." The young man's eyes were red. He was 19 and not yet a man in the way that mattered, and he was holding himself together by the fingernails. Ezra looked at Cora. Cora looked at Hattie. Hattie looked back, and her chin came up, and she said in the small, certain voice of a child who has just understood something about the world, "I have to come with you, don't I? Because he asked for me." "No, child," Cora said. "You stay here with the healer and the foal. I will be back." "You will be back," the girl repeated, in the way we repeat things we need to be true. Ezra saddled. By noon the three of them were moving north into the country of the lodgepole pines. With Cora in the wagon and Ezra on the stud she had pulled through the foaling, and the youngest son on his spent horse behind them. Wendell Brat was not what Cora had expected, and had expected both at once. He was in a featherbed in a large front bedroom in a house that smelled of cedar and money. His face was the color of tallow. He was shaking in the way a man shakes who is fighting a fever that wants to take him down. His eldest son was at the door with the rifle, but when he saw the wagon draw up and Ezra climb down, he lowered it and stepped aside. He was a young man with the look a young man gets when he has discovered in the worst possible way that he does not know how to do what is required of him. "Wendell," Ezra said from the doorway. "Ezra." Brat's voice was a crack. Then his eyes went past Ezra to the woman coming in behind him. "Cora Henley," he said. "I have heard of you." "So I understand," Cora said. He lay still a moment, breathing with effort. Then he said, in the small voice of a man whose body is being taken from him and who has nothing left to bargain with, "I am not going to live through this." "You don't know that," Cora said. "I do know that. I have known it for 10 years. What I did not know, until I saw you from the road yesterday morning coming back from whence I do not know, was that I have spent 20 years of my life being cruel to people who had done me no harm, because they had less, and I had more and I could. I am not asking forgiveness. I am asking the right thing. My wife is exhausted. My eldest son is sleeping with a rifle across his knees because he is afraid I will die and his uncle will come and try to take the place. My youngest is 19. He is not ready. I am asking the right thing, and I am asking it now, before I cannot ask it anymore. Ezra, my wife's younger sister, was bred here. She has the cattle sense. She has the business sense. She has the steady sense. I would like Cora Henley to come into my house and my yard and look at my books and be the person my wife is too tired to be and tell us, truthfully, what we are to do." He was out of breath by the end of it. The eldest son had lowered his head. Cora did not answer. She looked at Ezra. Ezra did not look back. "Ezra," she said, "I have a girl named Hattie who has waited 9 days for me to come home once, and I have not yet come home. I cannot leave her. I will not leave her." "Then I will go with you," Brat said. "I will be carried if I have to. I will be carried onto a wagon, and I will be carried home to the small cabin on the north pasture of Ezra Calloway's place, and I will lie in a feather bed until I either live or do not. Only let my wife come to your kitchen table and tell the truth of her books to the woman who pulled a foal out of a dying mare and held it up." He lay back as if the speaking had taken the last of what was in him. Ezra looked at Cora. Cora looked at the doorway. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Wendell. Yes to the small cabin. Yes to the truth. Yes to your wife at my table. Yes." She had not known she would say yes. But the thing about being seen, after years of being measured, is that it makes you larger than you thought you were. It makes room for the yes. She went home. Hattie was at the gate. The healer was at Hattie's heel. The foal was in the lower pasture, and it came at her whistle. Brat was carried, 3 days later, in a wagon. He lived. He lived badly, then less badly, then almost well. He never walked into Ezra's yard again without permission. He never once raised his voice in Cora's kitchen. He never once refused Cora a wage. He said, by spring, that the place had the first books it had had in 20 years, and his wife's sister was going to come home from Denver in the summer and learn what she was going to learn so that, when brought when at last, the place would still be a place and not a wound. I wonder, while you sit with this, if you have been the one who said yes before anyone expected you to say yes. The moment when something inside you is bigger than the question. Drop that in the comments. And if this story has moved something in you, you might consider liking it and subscribing. The work of making these stories quiet is real work, and your like is the gold standard. It tells us which stories are reaching you and which are not. It was Cora who first handed Hattie the foal's lead rope in confidence. It was Cora who stood at the kitchen window one March morning and watched the girl pull a yearling through a winter she had been afraid for it to enter. It was Ezra who said, after the spring roundup, after the cattle had been counted and the north pasture was green and Brat's eldest son had come to the kitchen table and bowed and asked his forgiveness in a voice that shook. Cora, there is something I would like to say to you, and I would like to say it only once. Say it, Ezra, she said. I have lost a wife. I have not been looking for anything. I have not, particularly, been looking for you. But I have, somewhere along the way, begun to notice that when I come down from the house in the morning, the first thing I listen for is whether Hattie is laughing. And the second thing I listen for is whether you are in the kitchen. And the third thing I listen for is whether the kettle is on. And none of those things are what I thought I was listening for at my age, but they are what I am listening for. He looked at her. She looked at him. Ezra, she said. Yes. I have been listening for the same 3 things. He nodded. Then he said, we might as well stop pretending that we are not. She put her hand flat. Then, on the kitchen table, the way he put his palm flat on the rail of a fence he was building, he put his hand over hers. Hattie, in the doorway, said, are you going to be my mother? Yes, Cora said. Are you sure? Yes. Then I am going to bed now, and I will expect you both in the morning. She was gone, like a small wind. That night, in the small cabin on the north pasture, with the lamp turned down and the snow just beginning to come again outside, Ezra sat at the edge of the bed and Cora sat at the edge of the rocking chair her mother had given her the year she was married the first time, and they did not speak for a long time. They did not need to speak for a long time. There was nothing that had to be said tonight that had not already been said by every morning they had quietly shared for the last 4 months. When they finally spoke, it was Ezra, looking at the window, who said, strange how the things you have given up on tend to find you. When you stop looking behind you, that is. I walked 9 days, she said. I walked into your yard with nothing. I walked out of it with the rest of my life. I think the trick is not the 9 days. I think the trick is that we let someone hand us a blanket when we are sitting in the straw with our hands shaking. He nodded. He could not have said it better himself. In the spring, when the lodgepole pines finished shedding their snow and the river opened up over the rocks and the foal from the foaling was a long yearling being ridden by Hattie in the front paddock, Cora and Ezra were married at the kitchen table, with Hattie as the only witness and the healer asleep under the bench. Wendell Brat came, leaning on his eldest son's arm. He kissed Cora on the cheek, and in the ear, so quietly only she could hear, he said, "Thank you for the small mercy of a yes when it would have been easier to ride on." "You are welcome, Wendell," she said. "You are welcome to walk into my kitchen any morning that you can do it on your own 2 feet. We have eggs every morning. We have coffee. We have a girl who is going to grow up to be something none of us have the right to plan for. Come when you can." That summer the cattle on the Calloway place went to a record count, and the foals Cora pulled through the spring made a foundation stock that any rancher would have paid for. That winter the small cabin on the north pasture had a rocking chair on the porch, and a tin of chicory, and a planter box that Ezra built in late October, where Cora started her first garden in spring. The healer slept on the porch between the 2 chairs. Hattie, that fall, went to school for the first time, walking 2 miles down the trail and back, and came home every afternoon with a question that no one had yet thought to ask. In the second spring, on a morning late enough that the snow had cleared out of every cut bank, and the cattle were already out on the lower range, Cora stood at the kitchen window with the kettle on, watching Hattie ride the yearling at a long trot up the pasture. The foal she had pulled out of the dying mare was now 3 years old and steady as a horse, and would have been the pride of any breeding operation in the country. The healer was asleep at her feet. Ezra was coming down from the barn. The country was quiet. She did not look behind her. There was nothing behind her anymore that she owed any of her mornings to. She thought of Tom and the daughter and the quilt her mother had pieced from wedding dresses. She thought about what becomes of the things you have lost, and how sometimes, if you let yourself be small long enough, you cannot help but become large again. When a child whistles at a fence rail, and the foal lifts its head, and a man turns his palm down on a fence post and says yes. Strange how the things you have given up on, she thought. Strange how they tend to find you when you stop looking behind you. The kettle began to sing. Ezra came up onto the porch. Hattie came down from the pasture with her hat in her hand. Cora set the kettle on the table, and the three of them sat down to coffee, and the morning began. If you stayed with Cora to the end, you have walked with me through one of the slower, truer things I have wanted to tell. Tomorrow night's story is about a girl who rode into a mountain town with a telegram she had stolen from her own father, and the man at the stage stop who tried not to read it, and what it cost both of them to do the right thing before dawn. It is called She Stole the Telegram, and the stage stop changed her name by morning. I will be here when you are ready. Good night, and God keep you all.